It was an old church. The foundation was of limestone blocks, and the structure itself was of plain old red brick. It had the requisite number of stained glass windows and large, imposing double doors at the front. The attached buildings, however, were newer. As the neighborhood declined, the church was able to occupy vacant lots and expand. A homeless center and soup kitchen were adopted in the Fishtown area. Father Doyle skillfully ran the ship, and even in hard times was able to keep things running. Parking was a problem in this part of town, but there were enough people in walking distance to keep life afloat. Now, young professionals were moving into the neighborhood, and the remaining homes were becoming desirable. Some of the newcomers were even interested in church services. "Good morning, Daniel." A tall, middle-aged man wiping the floor stopped and looked up. "Good afternoon, Father, and good morning to you, too. Do you have any plans for your birthday? I still think you should take the day off like I suggested." "Sort of. The ladies in the auxiliary department are going to trim my beard. This afternoon, Miss Stella at the thrift store is going to fit me for a fancy sport coat that came in last week. She saved it especially for me." This will be my first night out in almost 8 years. "Where have you decided to go?" "To the Sheraton, I think. I have enough money to buy almost anything I want off the menu. It's classy and a little flashy. Since I'm walking, I'm going to treat myself to a nice glass of red wine. I intend to enjoy the evening. After all, 50 years only comes around once." "Have you got enough money?" "I have enough, Papa. Save it for someone who needs it." They both laughed softly and went on about their business. For the past 8 years, Daniel Brown had lived in a small room in the basement of St. Vincent's Church. In exchange for room and board, Daniel kept all the buildings clean and presentable. He took care of all minor maintenance issues and coordinated any outside work when it was needed. For a nominal fee, he also did some work for the poorer parishioners. Most of them were too proud to accept help for free, but he didn't do it for the money. He was fed from the church canteen. One of the added benefits of working at St. Vincent's was free clothing. Daniel didn't abuse the system, but the ladies in the auxiliary always put aside any new clothes they thought might fit him. He was usually only interested in work clothes. For his birthday, they had given him a great corduroy jacket and khaki pants. The brown wingtip shoes were a little too much, but they were like new and fit perfectly. He planned to return the jacket and shoes the next day, but decided to keep the pants. The other thing was the grooming. Daniel felt like he'd been attacked. He had been shampooed, trimmed, and his beard trimmed. He had never had a beard before coming to St. Vincent. Now he couldn't imagine himself without one. They completed the onslaught with a manicure, the first of his life. The Sheraton was a short walk away. It quickly became apparent that the expensive stiletto heels were not suitable for walking. He wouldn't make that mistake again. The restaurant was a bit fancy, but there was a full menu hanging out front. The prices were a little higher than he'd bargained for, but he'd brought enough money with him to pay for almost anything he decided. There was no rush, so he took his time. "Excuse me, are you dining alone or are you expecting someone?" She was well-dressed, well-groomed, and probably lost. It took Daniel a second to realize she was addressing him. "Excuse me? What was that?" "My name is Marcia Nelson." She held out her hand, which Daniel took politely. "I'm here for the Society's awards ceremony at Empire Hall, and I'm in dire need of a chaperone." I responded to the invitation, and I don't have a chaperone. The meal has already been paid for, so all you have to do is sit with me and listen to some boring speeches. I would be most grateful. No strings attached? No. What else do I have to do? Just act nice and congenial and try to look like we're a couple. It'll help if you look like you like it. Daniel cast one last wistful glance at the restaurant menu, turned and sighed. "Okay, I think I can do that. My name is Daniel. Daniel Brown." Marcia Nelson took his hand and they walked toward Empire Hall. "Thank you." The evening didn't go as expected. He never told Marcia it was his birthday. He recognized a few people who attended the evening because they were regulars at St. Vincent S. No one had any idea who he was. He blended in and spoke. Marcia was very happy. For the first time in almost 8 years, he felt normal. It was a good feeling. The food wasn't what he expected, but it was free, and the company made it so much better. He missed the companionship of women. Marcia gave him a ride to the church. She didn't question the strange location. He was finally able to take off the awful wingtip shoes. In the morning, they would go back again, and he would not make that mistake again. That night, Daniel Brown slept soundly. Daniel was halfway through wiping down the pews when Father Doyle appeared. "How was your birthday, Daniel?" "Very well, but not as well as I expected." "You didn't get lobster?" "No. I ended up getting sea bass. It was very tasty, but not lobster." "How did that happen?" "A very nice lady named Marcia Nelson invited me to join her at the awards ceremony. It was a lot of fun, and the dinner was free." "Was it Marcia Nelson, the lawyer?" "I have no idea. She said she runs a small law office downtown. I don't even know what that is." "Daniel, she runs a legal clinic for the poor and homeless. She's very well known in the local community. You spent the evening with a very famous lady." "She seemed quite normal to me. Anyway, I enjoyed myself and I enjoyed her company." "Are you going to see her again?" "I don't think so. I don't know why she would want to." 2 weeks later, Marcia Nelson returned. She needed a chaperone for a local charity auction. Instead of approaching me, she asked Father Doyle if I was available. He found this quite amusing and continued to tease me for several weeks. She looked a little embarrassed when he told her about my situation. We had dinner at a small local restaurant before the event, and she insisted that I explain everything to her. About 8 years ago, I was living in Westchester with my wife, Caroline. The week before, our daughter, Claire, had left for college. We were just starting our lives as empty parents, or so I thought. "Claire was your only child?" "Yes. For the last 10 years, Caroline worked for a small company called Bixler Enterprises that made surgical instruments. I, on the other hand, have worked for Prospective National Insurance as an actuary for the last 20 years. All in all, we were comfortable and well off." "That was 8 years ago? Are you still married?" "I honestly don't know. Maybe. I hope not. But like I said, I don't know." "So what happened?" "It was quite simple, really. I came home from work one Friday night and Caroline informed me that she was going to spend the weekend in the Pocono Mountains with her boss, Carl Bixler. There was no discussion, no explanation, nothing. I didn't ask and she didn't volunteer." "Did this happen all the time?" "I have no idea. All I know is that he's married, has 2 kids, and is at least 15 years older than Caroline. I wasn't angry, just confused. I sat quietly, and 10 minutes later she was gone." "That's it?" "Well, sort of. The next day I took care of a few personal matters and then I left. A week later I was already working for Father Doyle at St. Vincent S. "You didn't take anything with you?" "Not exactly. Are you ready to go to the auction?" "I guess so, but I'd prefer you explain things better to me, maybe later on, okay?" "Okay." The auction was fun. It featured mostly local arts and crafts, some antiques, and gift cards from local merchants. Marcia bid on a painting by a local artist. It seemed a bit amateurish to me, but she said such a painting would look good in her office. I think it was an expression of community support. Before taking me to the church, Marcia asked one more question. "Did you contact your daughter after you left?" "I called Claire the next day. After I explained everything to her, she said I was overreacting. I didn't argue with her, but I haven't spoken to her since then either." Marcia didn't say anything. She thanked me for going with her, and I thanked her for inviting me. I guess I should have bid on the auction. Maybe next time. For the next few weeks, I had to put up with teasing from Father Doyle. The ladies in the store and dining room teased me a little too. It was all a lot of fun, and I took it for granted. And then Marcia came back. "Daniel, I need another favor. I have to attend a conference next week. It's being held at King of Prussia, and we'll have to stay overnight. Would that be okay with you?" "What do you mean?" "You'll be comfortable sharing a room, or would you prefer to have your own?" "That depends." "On what?" "Are you planning to take advantage of me?" "You won't be embarrassed by that?" I didn't answer, but a wide grin appeared on my face. She understood. Father Doyle overheard the conversation and was laughing when Marcia left. The celebration at King of Prussia was on a much larger scale than the previous ones. It was a statewide event. Marcia and I chatted for about an hour. She talked, and I just followed her and nodded at the right moments. I was getting pretty good at it, and I was enjoying it. And then everything changed. Marcia Nelson, it's good to see you. It's been too long." I cringed when I heard his voice. It was my lawyer and good friend, Seymour. He and I hadn't seen each other in over 8 years. I was grateful that he didn't seem to recognize me. "Seymour Schlump, you look the same as you did in college. You haven't changed a bit. How are you doing?" "Still the same fat, dumb, and happy. And yourself?" "Skinny, smart, but not depressed." It was a joke, and they both laughed. "Seymour, this is my friend Daniel. He's my escort for this evening." Seymour looked at me for the first time and started to smile. Suddenly, he grabbed me in a hug and started shaking me. Danny boy, I didn't recognize you with that beard. You look great, buddy." My cover was blown. "Do you two know each other?" "Of course. Danny and I went to elementary school together. We were best buddies for years until he ran away. Things are a little more professional now." "What does that mean?" I put my hand on Marcia's arm and sighed. "Seymour is my hereditary guardian." That elicited a confused look from Marcia and a smirk from my buddy Seymour. It got a little awkward for a moment, and then Seymour rejoined the conversation. "Daniel, I need to see you so we can clear some things up. I know you said you wanted privacy, but the time to rectify the situation has come and gone. Can you come see me tomorrow?" I looked at Marcia for the support I knew she couldn't give me. "Where to?" I asked. "To my office in Reading. All the papers and documents are there. We have to do this." "Marcia, can we go to Reading tomorrow?" "Of course. I wouldn't miss this case for anything. I love mysteries, and this one is a doozy. I want to know everything, and Seymour will tell me everything, won't he?" "For you, Marcia, everything. I'll see you tomorrow, bright and early." Seymour shook my hand and gave me another hug. "By the way, Danny, you've been a bachelor for over 3 years now. I'll explain everything tomorrow." As Seymour walked away, Marcia threw me a mocking, fierce look. "You only have 5 minutes to give me the Reader's Digest condensed version of what's going on." When I told you about what happened when I left my wife, I mentioned that I took care of everything. Now Seymour took care of everything for me. Usually when someone becomes guardian of an inheritance, it requires a judge's approval, but not always. Since I was healthy and mentally competent, Seymour was able to handle everything without court approval. I signed a bunch of different powers of attorney as well as many other legal documents. I trusted Seymour. Why? I needed to get away for a while, and I wanted to be isolated from Caroline. I also wanted to protect what few assets I had. Assets? I had a few stocks in my name and a couple of mutual funds I'd started before I got married. I figured that since Bixler was a wealthy man, Caroline wouldn't be too concerned about the few investments I had. Good. May I change the subject now? I'd like to. Since you are now single, how would you feel about changing our room to one with a king-size bed? Are you trying to seduce me? Absolutely. Seymour was already waiting for us when we arrived early in the morning. There was a whole pile of papers spread out on the meeting table, and there was even a secretary. He seemed well organized for the meeting, which was completely out of character for him if you knew Seymour. Caroline divorced me almost 3 years ago because I left her. Since Bixler was very rich, she wanted nothing from the divorce. Seymour tried to talk her into selling the house as a condition of the divorce, but she refused. She said let him go back to the bank, so he made her sign some papers and everything became mine. Seymour rented out the house and has been making mortgage payments in my name ever since. The tenants were more than willing to buy the house if I was willing. My guardian attorney had also filed state and federal income taxes for me for the past 8 years. The tax returns weren't too interesting, but they ensured my legitimacy. My mutual funds and stocks performed well. It automatically reinvested all dividends. I had completely forgotten about the 30 Krugerrands he was holding for me. Most of the meeting consisted of transferring everything back to me. Seymour had me sign several documents that released him from further responsibility for my property and welfare. Marcia seemed to be enjoying the whole thing. She had quite a few questions for Seymour about my ex-wife's current situation. He didn't have many answers. I told him to use one of the remaining forms of power of attorney to sell the house. The last thing he did was hand me a bill for his services for the past 8 years. Seymour wasn't cheap, but he made me far more than I needed to cover my expenses. By the time we were done, I had a big pile of paperwork and a nice check. I quietly slid them over to Marcia and smiled slightly at her. She readily grabbed them. Doyle's father had mixed feelings about my departure. On the one hand, he was happy for me, but on the other, he was sad to see me go. He already had a replacement picked out, and I agreed to make sure he was properly trained. I think you can guess where I ended up going. Marcia and I decided to live together for a while before making any permanent acquaintances. Her posh house was in an upscale Philadelphia neighborhood within walking distance of her office. I took a job processing student loans and Pell Grants at the Community College of Philadelphia. The work was not too challenging, but very enjoyable. Getting to know Marcia's family and friends was quite another matter. They were all well-educated and successful in their professions, but I had no trouble fitting in with them. Most of them were happy that Marcia had finally found a life partner. Epilogue. Carl Bixler had been diagnosed with early-stage Alzheimer's disease before his marriage to Caroline. Marcia very delicately informed his children of this. It only took a few months before they obtained an annulment of their father's marriage, and Caroline was able to take financial control. She now found herself single and unemployed. Daniel still had no contact with his daughter Claire.